Donald Trump shocked the nation this week when he announced that he was now a Democrat and supported nothing but liberal policies. This announcement caused a surge to almost 100% of Democrat voters switching party affiliation to join the Republican side. When asked why the change, President Trump said that after watching unhinged pregnant women put their babies at risk by guzzling Tylenol just to spite him, he realized he could get whatever he wants in life by just pretending it was opposite day. With that in mind, President Trump announced a new plan for an open border and high taxes. Of course, that was met with fierce backlash from the new Republican politicians, Bernie Sanders and AOC, who said that they always hated taxes and immigration and needed this country to limit the scope of government to be fiscally responsible. President Trump was quoted as saying he'll never cave to those kinds of crazy Republican demands. Wink, wink, nod, nod. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Okay, welcome. We have two topics that we are going to be going over this week. We're going to talk about Tylenism is what I almost said, Tylenol and autism. And then we're going to talk about this James Comey indictment. But first, before we get into that, my favorite comment from last week comes from Becky Daynard, 4404, who said, quote, "Thank you. Critical thinking is to be admired," end quote. No, Becky, thank you for the nice comment. Critical thinking is one of those things that people think it's rare. It's not really rare. It's just rare in politics. It seems as though everyone, when you get into this sort of tribal team sport aspect, your critical thinking goes out the window. So it's nice to remember, hey, let's all keep an open mind. Let's not get too partisan. Let's not just be my team's right, your team's wrong. Let's use our brains. And kids do this. Kids can take a step back and actually look at a big problem in a way that adults sometimes can't. So adults get this very narrow, very funneled view where you get this tunnel vision, and we can't use critical thinking to actually explore our ideas because they're entrenched already. That's why when you're a kid, you got to learn to keep an open mind, value other people's opinions more than your own, and maybe you can develop some critical thinking. Again, thank you, Becky, for the nice comment. Always appreciate that. Now, let's get into topic one, Tylenol and autism. Topics like this always surprise me that it's such a big deal because Donald Trump came out and made an announcement with RFK, who is the head of the Health and Human Services, and he recommended that pregnant women minimize the use of Tylenol during pregnancy because it might be linked to autism. Now, he made a couple different speeches about this, but I want to show you here. Just check this out first.
Effective immediately, the FDA will be notifying physicians that the use of let's see how we say that. Acetaminophen. Is that okay? Which is basically commonly known as Tylenol during pregnancy can be associated with a very increased risk of autism. So taking Tylenol is not good. All right, I'll say it. It's not good.
The president.
Okay. All right. Now, come back here. There we go. So if you listen to that statement, he says, first of all, it is kind of funny that we stumble over the word. I'm surprised more people didn't make a big deal out of this because, anytime Donald Trump does anything at all remotely wrong, everyone goes, oh, look at him, what a big dummy. The medical words are hard. All right, have you never say acetaminophen before? It's not a word that you look at and you go, oh, let's sound this out. And he's got a good humor about it. He says it a couple times and then he looks over at, I'm not sure who he's looking at, but he looks over and says, hey, we good with that? And he plays it off. He's very self-depreciating in that way. It's a hard word, whatever. But he gets up there. He says, hey, acetaminophen, commonly known as Tylenol, has been linked in pregnancy to autism, potentially. So we should minimize the use. Okay, this seems like a totally reasonable, totally rational, maybe a tiny bit overstated because he says, I'm going to say Tylenol is not good. Tylenol might be good in some cases. It just says you should consult with your doctor and you should limit its use during pregnancy. But he comes out there, very reasonable response to this. The response from the left is completely unhinged. I don't know how many posts I saw talking about Tylenol and the attack on science and attacks on RFK and Donald Trump. I saw just the weirdest, craziest response from people on the left who wanted to didn't want to discuss this issue, but wanted to just act as though it's the craziest thing in the world to pretend a medication could have negative effects. And I saw the most disturbing thing is a trend where I was going to play video, and I actually decided I don't want to play it because it's disgusting. You have a bunch of pregnant women parading around dancing with their obviously pregnant bellies out, just eating Tylenol to spite Donald Trump. What a crazy thing to do. Listen, I name call sometimes on this show. I do, where I am very willing to dismiss people who want to call for violence or themselves are just rude or dismissive or don't want to have conversation. People who want to have conversation, I love it. If you want to come on here and you say, hey, your ideas are wrong, X, Y, and Z, I say, all right, I don't think so. Here's my rationale, blah, blah, blah. That's the way it's supposed to work. I have no time for people who want to punch at me and then expect conversation back. We're going to punch them. So when I name call, it's normally because somebody's doing something egregious or calling for violence or being rude themselves. But what we saw here is disgusting. These women who are doing this just to spite Donald Trump are disgusting people. They're gross. This is a moronic behavior from a bunch of terrible people. And imagine just one of them has a child with special needs. All of a sudden, they're going to have to actually look at themselves and say, oh, shoot, did I do this? It's just sick behavior. It's sick behavior that led to the intro, by the way, where you're looking at Donald Trump could come out and say anything, and Democrats have to be opposed to it, even when that thing makes total sense. So, for example, when Donald Trump was in office the first time, he had the most secure border he'd ever seen. Joe Biden came in and said, Donald Trump wanted to secure this border. That's terrible. Let's overturn all his policies, and I'll use executive orders to repeal them all. Then we had the worst border we've had probably ever. And then Donald Trump comes in and he does it again. And Joe Biden even recognized this towards the end of his presidency because he slowly, without much fanfare, without much press, he said, actually, let's put some of these Donald Trump policies back in place because it actually kind of worked. But I know we had to take them off for 3 years, but now we're trying to look like we're tough on the border. Let's actually do some Donald Trump stuff again. It's ridiculous. You just oppose Donald Trump to oppose Donald Trump. It's silly. Donald Trump is right about a lot of things. He's wrong about some things because everyone is. When he does something good, you should be for him. This is something, again, it's coming from the left, where the left likes to claim that Republicans are science deniers. I'm not a science denier. I never have been. I am opposed, for example, let's just run through the common list here. I'm opposed to a lot of climate change prescriptions, not because I disagree that climate change is happening, but because I think that your solutions are ridiculous. And I don't think that they make sense. I think that the cost-benefit analysis does not work. And I think that that's ridiculous. It's not because I'm a science denier. That vaccine that came out for COVID, I didn't think a lot of people should get it who got it, not because I'm a science denier, because I looked at it and I said, it doesn't stop transmission. Okay. Then why would a young person get it? If they're not at risk from serious COVID, why would a young person get it when you're looking at the risks of myocarditis from the vaccine and you say, that's more scary to me than anything that's going to happen to a healthy 30-year-old who gets COVID. If you're under the age of 30, why would you ever get it? It made no sense to me. Oh, it makes me a science denier. In what world? I love science. I think science is great. I'm not a science denier. I'm a person who actually listens to science. So when you talk about, like, if, for example, there's a lot of ifs in this scenario coming up. If I was married, and if I had a wife, and if she was pregnant, and then all these things. If I was dealing with somebody who was pregnant, and they say, hey, should I take Tylenol during my pregnancy? I would say, I wouldn't if I was you, because I would minimize it, because we don't really know. There might be a link to autism, although it is a little tentative. I mean, there are some studies that have linked it to autism, so just be on the safe side. That changes in a couple things we'll get into in just a minute. But what's the harm in that? What is wrong with people who just want to say, oh, no, Tylenol, there's never been a negative benefit of Tylenol in its life. There's no such thing as an adverse reaction with Tylenol because it's the miracle drug. Because Donald Trump said it might cause autism? Of course it doesn't. Nothing's ever caused autism. Autism doesn't exist. Donald Trump, what are you talking about? You're a crazy person. Of course there are going to be side effects with any drug. I always use vitamin C as an example. If I was to sit here and take vitamin C and vitamin C and vitamin C and just drink those emergency packets all day long, I'll overdose on vitamin C, which is a completely, almost completely harmless vitamin, you can overdose on it. You can overdose on anything. You can have an adverse reaction to any drug. Every drug in the world has unintended negative side effects. There's not a miracle drug out there that has nothing but positive benefits. It doesn't exist. Everything can hurt you in certain circumstance. So Tylenol, by saying it might cause autism, what does that do? How does that negatively impact you? Oh, you're a woman, and oh, you're pregnant, and oh, you have a fever. Okay. Is anyone saying you can't take Tylenol? No. The studies that are done on Tylenol tend to be long-term habitual users of Tylenol, people who use Tylenol a lot. They say, hey, there's an increased risk in certain neurodivergent disorders that can happen from that during pregnancy. It's not for someone who says, oh, I have a fever today, maybe I'll take Tylenol. That's really not what we're talking about. But people act as though because Donald Trump said it, because RFK said it, it must be just crack science. It's not. Here, let me show you some things here so that you don't think I'm just making it up. Like the camera was covering up my little thing on the thing. Here we go. How about this? Don't take my word for it. Now, what do I know? I don't have a degree in, I don't know, molecular biology or chemistry, or I'm not a pharmacologist. What do I know about drugs? Well, all right. How about this? What about Harvard? Harvard had a study, the title of which was Using Acetaminophen During Pregnancy May Increase Children's Autism and ADHD Risk. This was published in August 2025. Okay. That was a month ago? A month ago, almost to the day, they published this study. Okay, all right. You don't like Harvard. All right, that's fine. How about this one? This is from Johns Hopkins. Taking Tylenol during pregnancy associated with elevated risk for autism and ADHD. That was published in 2019. How about this one from Mount Sinai? Mount Sinai study supports evidence that prenatal acetaminophen use may be linked to increased risk of autism and ADHD. Okay. All right. Oh, you don't like any of those. What about PubMed? PubMed, Association of Cord Plasma Biomarkers in utero acetaminophen exposure with risk of attention deficit hyperactive disorder and autism spectrum disorder in childhood. This, by the way, expanded, if we can see the results. So what they're finding is a little increase that varies in rate, but an increase in attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and autism in the use of prenatal acetaminophen. So if you're using Tylenol, which is, by the way, in case people don't understand how this works, name brand drugs like Tylenol have the actual drug is not, that's just a name brand. So acetaminophen is actually sold in all sorts of drugs and all different names. Just the most popular is Tylenol. We're not talking about Tylenol specifically. We're talking about the underlying drug, which is acetaminophen. And so they're saying, hey, Tylenol exposure can increase these risks. There's another one from PubMed that says, this one is actually, this is not another study. This was just a precautionary tale. A bunch of people signed on to something that said, hey, we should limit Tylenol or acetaminophen use during pregnancy because there's potential risk. What else we got on here? We got from the environmental health site, evaluation of evidence of acetaminophen use and neurodevelopment disorders using navigational guide methodology. Again, all of these are studies that have been done on this topic, some of which suggest an increased risk of autism. I've seen up to 30% in some of these studies. They say an increased risk. Oxford did another one. Yeah, same deal. Again, some of these said, there's not really a correlation we could find. Some of them have said up to a 30% increase in people exposed to acetaminophen prenatal acetaminophen. So it's kind of ridiculous that you're just dismissing this outright. It's like the people who did this with vaccines. You say the initial study about vaccines suggested that there was a thing that was done on vaccines that basically this doctor said, vaccines are causing autism. Completely debunked. I agree. Mostly debunked because that doctor was kind of a quack. He falsified some data. He actually lost his medical license. So it started this whole conversation about autism and vaccines and whether or not vaccines cause autism. And you say, well, no, there was a study done. The initial guy who did this was a quack. He was dismissed. And you say, okay, so are we just all now in agreement that because this one guy was a quack, that vaccines are 100% safe? The answer is, of course not. They've never been 100% safe. Do vaccines cause autism? I've never seen anything that suggests that they do. Does that mean that it's completely what's the logical fallacy? Argumentum ex silentio. Argumentum ex silentio. The argument to silence. Because you don't see something, it means it's proven false. That's not true at all. Because, I haven't seen anything that says vaccines cause autism, or there's not a study out there that proves it, therefore it's false. Well, no, that doesn't mean anything. It just means that, okay, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Autism is not monocausal. It's not coming from Tylenol. You understand that, right? That's not what Donald Trump is saying. He's saying it could be one of the factors. I think there's something like 800 or some ridiculous number of genetic markers that might have something to do with autism. We don't know what causes it. So when you sit there and say, I know what causes it, and it's not Tylenol, you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about because we don't know what causes it. Because, again, there's 800 genetic markers for autism. So by saying this, it's not a diminishment of anything. There's something, actually, I remember this now. I didn't write it down on my little notes here, but I wanted to get into it. Here we go. So people are treating this. I don't know how to say this. This is actually kind of a complicated thing to say. People are treating this as though by saying we can cure autism, that this would be a bad thing. Imagine if we had a pill that could get rid of autism. And people are acting like this is a bad thing to do. As though you'll see these people who say, oh, my child's autistic. You don't understand. The love I have for my child who is autistic, and I take care of him, and you don't understand what it's like. And my child's just as unique and special and loved as any child who was born without autism. And I say, hey, that's great. That's lovely. That's amazing. Why would you ever want to limit your child into the paths they can choose in life by not wanting them to be better? Oh, what am I saying? Am I saying it's worse to be autistic than to not be autistic? Yes, I am saying that. I'm saying doesn't make you a worse person, but it limits you in life in ways that things don't. Because there are levels. Obviously, you got people functioning just fine in life who have Asperger's or some mild case of autism. But autism is a spectrum, right? At the end of that spectrum, you have people who are nonverbal, who can't function, who will never work, who do not live a productive and meaningful life because they are limited by this thing that they have. And it's the same way. You could say this about anything. Like if I said, hey, it would be better for a child to be born without Down syndrome than with Down syndrome. People will say that, oh my gosh, you hate the Down syndrome community. You think that, look at this Down syndrome person who works at McDonald's and is happy and fun and has a family who loves them. And I say, hey, that's great. That's beautiful. Do you think that their life would have been better had they been born without Down syndrome? And maybe not better. Maybe their life is great. But if you're born, imagine this, you're born. You have the option as a parent to say, I want my child to be born, and they can have all of these possibilities in life. And it's an endless tree that just goes out from birth that just explodes into eternity. They can go here. They can be a scientist, or they can be the president, or they could be a running back in the NFL, or they can work at McDonald's, or they can be a mechanic, or any of these jobs. They can do anything they want in life. They can be educated. They can do all these things. But the tree exists. But then I come through and I say, or what I can do is I can give them a condition that'll take away a lot of these branches on the tree. Why would I ever want that as a parent? It's not to say that having Down syndrome or having autism or having any disability is the worst thing that ever happened and it'd be better if you were dead. No one's saying that. What I'm saying is if we could cure things, it's better. If you're born with no legs, is it better? Is your life better? No, it's not better. It might be great, and it might be very fulfilling, and you might find a purpose in life, and that's awesome, and that's wonderful. But would your life have been easier if you were born with legs? The answer is yes. Excuse me. Just like autism. Is it better if a child is born without autism or with autism? I'm going to say, on a whole, without. Maybe there's some exceptions. Hey, you get that autistic guy who is not that socially awkward and is really smart. You know, the kind of thing where you're throwing matchsticks on the ground. He's like 93. You put an equation up on the board, and he'll be like, oh, it's X over 2Y squared. And you're going, oh, all right, damn. All right, cool. But again, we're talking about an exception here, right? That's not normally what happens. So, no, this is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's not a demonization of anyone to say, hey, if we could cure autism, it would be good for the world. That would be good for the world. And you're being selfish if you think it's not. And I understand that that's hard to hear because there are a lot of people out there who are full of love and full of joy and want nothing but the best for their children. And that's awesome. And they look at this and they think that somehow they say that it is making their child less than to say it's bad to have autism. It's not saying that. It's not making anyone's life worse. It's just saying, hey, would it have been better for your child to have more opportunities in life? The answer is yes, that would be better. And I understand when you're close to a situation, sometimes you can't see it like that. Sometimes to say, hey, we're going to cure autism makes it sound like something's wrong with this person or that they're less than. And again, no one's saying that. No one's saying that. It would just be better if this was a thing. So Tylenol, let's get back to it. Tylenol, is it a bad thing to use when you're pregnant? Probably. Just for right now. We don't know because, again, there's a lot of studies that say there's no causal link. We can't prove that, and it's unhealthy to say that we can, and it's unproductive to say that we can because we can't. I say, all right, that's fine. And then you see other ones that say, actually, we're seeing there's an increase in the risk. And I say, all right, well, that's fine too. I just avoid it. Now, here's a caveat, because this is, again, my opinion talking. I'm not a doctor. I'm not telling you what to do. There are also some problems with trying to study this. For example, let's say this. Imagine for a second that Tylenol does not cause autism. We just say 100% sure. We know it doesn't. But I'm trying to study whether or not it does. And somebody gets a fever. And their fever, they have this low-grade fever, and they take Tylenol to cure the fever. But the fever is persistent. It doesn't come down, so they have to take Tylenol. And eventually they beat the fever. But then I say, oh, actually, look, they got to the end. They have this autistic child. Therefore, they took this Tylenol during pregnancy. Their child had autism, da-da-da. But we know Tylenol doesn't cause it. It turns out that fevers cause autism because fevers obviously negatively impact your fetus. Or they can negatively impact your fetus. So we say, how do you separate people who take Tylenol for an illness and the illness that they're taking the Tylenol for? It's kind of a hard thing to do. You understand what I'm saying? The methodology here is a little difficult, and it's one of the reasons why autism in general is kind of a difficult thing to study because when you're studying medications, again, you're trying to separate off the disease from the medication. That's kind of a hard thing to do in medicine. And there are a million things, possibly genetic factors, possibly environmental factors. Obviously, I really think, not a doctor, going to say it again, I think environmental factors probably play a huge role in the rate of autism that we are seeing, the gigantic spike in autism we've seen, because genetically, we're not changing that much. We haven't changed that much in the last 40 years, genetically. But our environment certainly has. The things that we're surrounded with certainly have. And there's got to be some sort of environmental cause, I would think, that would indicate why this spike is so great. I don't know that for a fact. Again, this is my speculative guess. I don't know the answer. But again, I'm not opposed to saying I wouldn't want somebody who is pregnant around me, I'm close with, that to take Tylenol unless they absolutely had to, unless it's said by the doctor, hey, we need to control his fever. And I get it. Acetaminophen is the way we do it. You can't take Advil because Advil is already not recommended for pregnant patients. And you can't take ibuprofen for the same reason. So I get it. Tylenol is your go-to for fever breaker. Why this makes you so angry, I don't know. I don't understand it. And why somebody would have the unhinged reaction is to just guzzle a bunch of Tylenol to prove Donald Trump wrong, to prove RFK is a quack, to say, I believe in science. First of all, don't take a bunch of Tylenol ever. It is the worst way to die. If you OD overdose on Tylenol, it is the worst way to die. Don't do it. But take my word for it. It is not a smart move. So never do that, and never just avoid it. I don't understand. I don't understand what the problem is. Anyway, we're gonna move on because I could rant on this all day, but it's just my opinion. It's a bad thing to take while you're pregnant. Okay, let's get into topic 2. James Comey indicted. Dun dun dun. Who is James Comey? He is the former head of the FBI. He is a bad guy, in my opinion. He is a partisan hack. He used his office to play politics, and I think that he's a bad dude. I really believe that he's not a good actor. I used to think so. I used to think he was more noble than he is. And in the last 3 or 4 years, especially, there's some things have come to light that I go, oh no, he's a bad guy. Oh, he tricked me. He's a bad dude. And let's start with when he really rose to prominence. Anyone remember during the 2016 election cycle, 2 weeks before the election, James Comey comes out on TV. He says, Hillary Clinton broke the law, but we're not going to indict her because we think it would be wrong. Okay, all right. He kind of put his thumb on the scale there. It's not a good thing to do. But let me defend him for a moment. I am not opposed to this because you say, all right, well, there should be one standard. I agree. At the time, we weren't really trying to arrest politicians for these breaches of classified information. Hillary Clinton violated, she had an email server in her home that was unsecured, that had classified documents on it. This is against the law. Was Hillary Clinton ever accused of doing anything with those documents? Did she sell them to a foreign power? Was she doing anything nefarious? No, she just had them in in an unsecure place where they probably could have been breached. It's not a good thing to do. In my opinion, it should be a disqualifying thing for somebody who wants to be president. I think that you mishandle classified documents. I actually think you should be held to account and thrown in jail. That's my opinion. However, let me defend this real quick, what I just said. Hillary Clinton was running for president of the United States. We were 2 weeks out from the election back in 2016. It would have been a bad thing for the country to throw her in jail. It would have been. And you can make an argument that it wouldn't have been. You can convince yourself. You can delude yourself all you like. It would have been a bad thing for the country. Just like I think it was a bad thing for them to try and throw Donald Trump in jail. That is a crazy thing to do, and I ripped every prosecutor in the government and Joe Biden and the DOJ for doing just that. It would have been a bad thing to do for Hillary Clinton. Yes, I believe Hillary Clinton violated the law. But at that stage, it was a bad idea. And then when Donald Trump got in office, you know what they didn't do? They didn't try and prosecute her because he realized that there's not a way to do it without seeming partisan, without making the country more divided. And I thought it was a good choice. Hillary Clinton broke the law. It is a very clear thing that she did that broke the law. Donald Trump also maybe broke the law. I think there are certain cases to be made that he did. Joe Biden broke the law, certainly. Mike Pence broke the law, certainly. Like these guys, politicians are bad with classified papers. I agree that these high-ranking politicians should be held to account. It would have been a bad thing to do. I thought Comey was fine for not doing it. However, it has come to light that he is also probably, as much as anyone else, responsible for the entire Russian hoax narrative. He basically laundered the Steele dossier into public view by taking this unsubstantiated piece of garbage reporting and taking it to Donald Trump and presenting it to him. And by presenting it to him, he made it a news story. The Steele dossier, the thing that said Donald Trump was a Russian cat's paw, Vladimir Putin had a bunch of dirt on him, the thing about the hookers peeing on the bed, all this stuff, it came from James Comey having a meeting with Trump, which gave rise to Russiagate. It's a nonsense thing. So James Comey done a lot of bad things. He has been charged this week with giving false statements and obstruction of justice, which these things carry up to a 5-year jail penalty. It's serious crimes to do. Now, what brought this about? So Comey testified under oath. He was under oath when he did this. He said that he had not authorized someone else to be an anonymous source to a news report. He claimed that that statement was false in regards to whether or not he gave authorization to someone to leak to a news report. Now, I'm going to just say this is not true. I don't believe him. I think that he lied under oath right here, and I think that the prosecutors are saying that he absolutely did authorize a leak to the media. He has done this before. This is not even in dispute that he did this before, but he's saying, well, I didn't do it this time. And so after he was fired, Donald Trump fired him when he became president, Comey authorized, this is the part that is not disputed, Comey authorized a friend of his to share with a reporter an unclassified memo from the Oval Office that requested Donald Trump ask the FBI to shut down the case against Mike Flynn. Comey gave this to his friend and told his friend to go give it to a reporter to make a news story that Donald Trump was trying to squash the investigation into Mike Flynn. So Comey absolutely leaks documents to people, to the news, as the head of the FBI. Now, again, this was after being fired, but he had done this before. This is not the first time that he ever did this. So he absolutely leaks documents, and he did this. And do I think that he leaked any classified documents? Absolutely, I do. Ted Cruz, they had a hearing in 2020. He asked Comey, he said, quote, this is from Ted Cruz, quote, on May 3rd, 2017, in this committee, Chairman Grassley asked you point blank, have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation? You responded under oath, never. He then asked, have you ever authorized someone else in the FBI to be an anonymous source in a news report about the Trump investigation or the Clinton administration? You responded again under oath, no. Comey's response to Ted Cruz was, I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017. So 2 times he has denied leaking information to the press about Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation or having someone else do it. Not true. We know that he's done this in the past. We definitely think, we don't know exactly what the indictment is alleging here, but do I think he's guilty? Yeah, probably. Do I think he should go to jail? Yes. And I'll tell you this straight up. I've said this before in the past. I am absolutely for locking more politicians and more prominent people in jail when they break the law. If James Comey lied under oath, if he committed perjury, you should absolutely go to jail. Because let me tell you something. If you were on trial, if you were on stand, if you were in one of these committees where you had to swear under oath, if you're going before a hearing at the Senate and you swear under oath and you commit perjury, you would go to jail. The fact that he's the head of the FBI, I do not care. Perjury should be considered a serious crime. A serious crime would absolutely go to jail because our entire judicial system, our entire legal system is based on the idea that eyewitnesses are not allowed to lie, that people are not allowed to lie under oath. It's the basis of the entire justice system. Nothing else, of anything else, it is one of the most fundamental core beliefs of the justice system. You are not allowed to lie under oath. And so by lying under oath, you commit a very serious crime. And when you lie to the Senate under oath, you should go to jail for perjury. So if he lied, take him to jail, straight to jail. And I think that that's a fine thing to do. I do not think that he deserves special treatment. I do not think that this is politically targeted. And I don't care if it is. Imagine that it was. Imagine that Donald Trump said, hey, James Comey's a bad guy. We're going to investigate him. And they do this. Okay, all right. Do I feel bad? No. You know why? Because I could pull up a mugshot right now of probably 18 to 20 people who served in the Trump administration who have been handcuffed and photoed and taken to jail for nonsense crimes. So do I feel James Comey, if he committed this crime, which is a real crime that demands justice, do I feel bad if he goes to jail? No, I don't. And he's not a hero. By the way, I wanted to point this out. I actually bought his book. I got this book, A Higher Loyalty, Truth, Lies, and Leadership by James Comey. So I got this book a number of years ago. It actually sits, it's kind of hard to see, it sits on this shelf over here. So this third shelf is the shelf. Some of the books on there I actually haven't read. So this is also my reading pile. So there's a section of this shelf that has books that I haven't read. And this is one of those books. I actually never read this book. And I wanted to back when I bought it. But it's been so many years, I don't care to read it anymore. Because like I said, at the time I was like, oh, I'd love to get his perspective on a couple things. And now I think, oh, he's just a liar. He's just a liar and a grandstander, and I don't really care what he has to say. And if he winds up in jail, okay, I'm not going to shed a tear. So anyway, I don't know if he's guilty. I suspect that he is. I don't know that he is. I don't know any of the stuff that I'm saying if he actually is guilty of this crime. I just think if he is, he should go to jail, and it wouldn't surprise me if he is. That's all I can say right now because, like I said, we don't know more of the indictment. We don't obviously have access to what happened in the grand jury, so we'll keep an eye on this situation, but there's one more thing that I really wanted to show you. Oh, actually, you know what? I totally forgot to do this in the first section. This is really important. I was going to share this because I thought it was hilarious. I was saying earlier, just to jump back to the Tylenol thing before we get off here, I was saying earlier that I don't think it's a good thing and I wouldn't want someone pregnant to take Tylenol because of these increased risks. And that's just my opinion. But I wanted to let you know who shares my opinion. My opinion is actually shared by the official Tylenol account, which says, we actually don't recommend using any of our products while pregnant. Thank you for taking the time to voice your concerns. You know, they tweeted that out March 7th, 2017, but it has resurfaced recently because obviously it's in the news. Tylenol doesn't recommend that pregnant people take their product. I'm just saying, it's not just me. And also, Rhonda Patrick, who is awesome. If you don't know Rhonda Patrick, you should check her out. She's great. She said, it's worth noting that there is an association between acetaminophen during pregnancy and childhood behavioral issues. Nothing is new. And then she linked to a study that said an increase, 30% increase in autism spectrum and hyperactive symptoms in children. That was one study. And then, I mean, she just went on this whole big thing. But Rhonda Patrick, someone to check out if you don't know her. She is really, really smart and very science-driven. But she basically is saying autism and ADHD, it comes from a bunch of things. It could be maternal inflammation and infection, vitamin D deficiency, low omega-3, metabolic issues, insulin resistance, diabetes, obesity, all that kind of stuff. BPA, plastic chemicals, sperm, epigenetic factors. There's a bunch of things. But she's saying it absolutely could be one of them. It is not monocausal. It has a bunch of different things that could contribute to it. Anyway, I just wanted to touch on that because I realized I didn't bring those up in the first section. But I was pulling this up because I wanted to show you something. This is sort of our unofficial topic 3 of the week. I don't really have anything to say about it. I just was really excited that Donald Trump unveiled the new presidential wall in the presidential Walk of Fame in the West Wing. And I just want to show you, this is a beautiful thing. So you can see, for those of you just listening, it's all the presidential portrait, Reagan, the first Bush, Clinton, the second Bush, you got Obama, and then Donald Trump looking great. And then there's a picture. There's a picture of the auto pen signing Joe Biden's name where his portrait should be, and then another picture of Donald Trump. I thought this was fake. I thought someone photoshopped this. This is absolutely real. It seemed like everyone was sharing it, and I thought that was just hilarious. How do you not love Donald Trump? He's so funny. People get so upset about this. Oh my gosh, how childish. No, this is funny. He put the auto pen signing Biden's signature in the frame in the West Wing. I mean, that's top tier trolling and just funny. I don't care who you are. That's just a funny thing. Anyway, I just wanted to share that with you because it made me giggle. So that's it. That's all we got to say for the week. And I want to say that if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave them in the comments below. Obviously, this Tylenol thing has been a big deal. So I'm curious to hear what people's thoughts are on it. If I'm off base or if you are like, hey, this is ridiculous, blah, 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 blah. Let me know. Put it in the comments. And maybe, hey, if you make a great comment, you might even wind up on the show next week. Wouldn't that be exciting for you? Anyway, we're going to leave it there for the week. As always, I'm Tyler Chrestman. I hope you guys have an excellent week, and I will catch you next Friday.